When the plan was determined, Zheng immediately flew into the sky. He looked down from 10,000 meters up in the sky, still unable to see the ends of this vast and endless sea. With Zheng's current strength, he was able to break through to the atmosphere with just destruction, without even activating Chaos, Genesis Splitter. His newly learned defensive technique using the collision of refined chi and magic, as well as the red flame, protected him from burning up in the atmosphere. However, he wasn't able to survive for long periods in a vacuum, so 10,000 meters up was his best choice. It's the second last battle. The final battle is next. No matter what battles may come in the future, at least against my clone, I don't want to lose again. I definitely won't lose. Zheng silently looked down, where the remainder of Team China was. They were the comrades most worthy of his trust and reliance. Whether for them, for Lori, to live on, or to return to the real world, he wasn't permitted to lose. Team East C. We have to capture their Psyche Force user alive, or else Xian's and Honglu's plan for the final battle will have deficiencies, and Lan. Zheng sighed softly again. He had complicated feelings towards Lan. Saying that he didn't like her would be a lie. A beauty with deep feelings for him who could give up even her life for him. No matter how cold-hearted he was, or how deep his feelings for Lori were, he wasn't able to erase the guilt and complicated feelings he had for Lan in his heart. This was obvious from how he had carried Lan when that pitiful girl had fallen into the sea just now. Whatever. These feelings really can't be severed. Thinking about it is still confusing, so I'll ignore it for now. I have to save her from her heart's devil. I won't let Team East C escape. Zheng let out a long and loud cry in the sky, and flew far off. That speed was several times faster than aeroplanes, and he disappeared from Team China's line of sight in the blink of an eye, leaving the 10 or so of them there floating in the sea. Xian had been engrossed in his documents the whole time. He only lifted his head to look at the sky after Zheng was gone, then lowered his head. The storm shall be here soon. The storm is coming and it's a really huge one. Zheng had already flown several tens of kilometers. Before he had flown far, he saw dark storm clouds in the distance. The distant sky, to the distant horizon, were all enshrouded in these storm clouds, without an end in sight. Lightning and thunder accompanied one another in these storm clouds, and from time to time 1 or 2 streaks of purple lightning would strike the sea. Violent hurricanes continuously blew. It truly was a large storm. Zheng was slightly hesitant. Then, he directly flew below the storm clouds. If he flew above, he wouldn't have to suffer the wind and rain. However, he didn't have Psyche Force scanning, so he could only search for ships below the clouds using his eyes. As soon as he entered, several lightning bolts bombarded Zheng. A gorgeous brilliance flashed on Zheng, and the lightning bolts scattered into nothingness. However, it hadn't been comfortable for Zheng either. Refined chi and magic didn't come from nowhere, so after taking a few lightning bolts, he finally descended from 10,000 meters in the sky to just 1,000. It was only that this position couldn't see as far on the sea, and the speed of searching for a boat was much slower. The scope of this storm is really huge, and its power is so violent. This should be the difficulty of the disaster movie, the perfect storm. Normal ships indeed aren't fast in this storm. If we can seize a warship, we can ride the wind and waves, and can get to Senkaku Islands faster than Team East Sea. Not discussing Zheng's search for a ship for now, the remaining people were floating in the sea. After about half an hour, the horizon began to darken. A rain cloud as thick and solid as ink opened, and slowly unfurled. Slowly, small waves began to appear on the surface of the sea, getting higher and higher as they came. The swaying made everyone float there unsteadily. Damn it, the storm really is coming, and we're floating like this on the sea? Well, probably have sunk to the bottom of the ocean before Zheng finds a ship, right? Cheng Xiao, that loud mouth, began to babble rubbish. The rest remained silent. Only the few who had just entered the realm had faces filled with worry. They didn't know if this small airship basket was sturdy enough in the face of this menacing storm, and whether it could resist the surging waves in this storm. If it couldn't, they wouldn't be able to survive alone in the sea with their constitutions. If things reached that stage, it would be terrible. Everyone cast their gazes at Xian. This fellow was always referred to as Doraemon by Zheng, so he would surely have a way to resolve the current predicament, right? This was a fixed mindset everyone was used to, that Xian, the one with the deepest secrets in Team China, would definitely have something hidden up his sleeves. They were just waiting for him to take it out. Speaking of which, he's getting closer to Doraemon's image by one big step now with his spatial pouch. Zero and the rest didn't open their mouths to say anything, however they were laughing internally. They saw several rookies who were still inexperienced look at Xian. They were also excited to see how Xian would resolve the current predicament. That fellow was also extremely straightforward. He lifted his head and looked at several people. Then, he looked down to look at documents again. If we don't hold out, then we're dead probably. He really said that in the end. Zero, Wangxia and a few others laughed bitterly seeing this. This fellow Xian could never say anything pleasant sounding. He had also talked about how Zheng would die if he couldn't endure when he was establishing his foundation. Now, facing everyone's expectations, he naturally wouldn't stand out like some great hero. If he really stood out like some great hero, people would most likely conversely not dare to accept his help. After all, no one wanted to casually be schemed against like Zheng like the matter with foundation establishment. Xian, are the documents you keep looking at about the data obtained during Zheng's foundation establishment? Yes. It was data obtained with great difficulty. As expected. A large reason of why he wanted Zheng to establish his foundation was so that he could get this data to research cultivation. Several of the rookies felt a chill in their heart hearing this. They didn't dare to look at Xian, afraid of being dragged into Zheng's destiny of being schemed against for a long time. The veterans of Team China were smiling bitterly. They didn't have too much of a fear towards Xian, but rather emotions of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He was the brain of Team China, and also Team China's soul. It could be said that he was an irreplaceable member of Team China, existing at the same position as Zheng. Apart from some bad habits he had, this man had never betrayed or abandoned his comrades in the battlefield. Of course, this was with the precondition he acknowledged you as his comrade. At this moment, a wave several meters tall came crashing down. It tossed the small airship basket into the air. When it fell, several people dropped into the water. Before they could float up, several more waves came crashing over. The waves came in a never-ending manner. Pea-sized raindrops gradually fell from the sky as well. When everyone had floated up from the sea, purple lightning abruptly flashed in the skies. With a boom, the storm finally arrived. The distant Zheng flew faster the more he flew. In the end, he used explosion, shooting forward like lightning. As he saw the storm get more and more violent, and the surface of the sea filled with meter-high waves or even more, he didn't know whether his comrades would be able to hold out. They didn't even have a ship, and the rookies had prospects more grim than promising. Zheng couldn't not do his best to find a ship, to save them from the storm even earlier. I see it. At the limits of Zheng's vision, he saw a small ship in the distance floating there. He immediately shouted in excitement. That voice even covered the roaring of the storm, causing several on the ship to look at the sky. The dynamic vision of these humans was limited, so they only saw a human figure descend from the skies at high speed. Before they could recover from their surprise, a man about 20 years of age was standing on the deck of the ship. As Zheng had come in too strange a manner, for a time the sailors on deck all stood transfixed to the ground, until a giant wave came rolling over, dragging a sailor into the water. The sailor cried out, and everyone recovered from their shock. However, how were they to save that sailor? In this violent storm, it was a death sentence if anyone was thrown overboard. Just as everyone was mournfully calling out the sailor's name, Zheng stomped down suddenly and shot out. He picked up the sailor before the sailor even landed in the water, then his foot stepped down on the empty air and shot back up. This sudden change made everyone call out, but what they were calling out was Superman, as if they had determined he was one of those superheroes from American movies. Whether or not I'm a Superman, I'm commandeering this boat now. Come with me to save some people. Zheng exhaled. Being drenched with rainwater and breathing in the damp air from the waves wasn't pleasant, but the significance of standing on a deck made him heave a sigh of relief. The sailors froze hearing this, with obvious hesitation. However, a man wearing a short-sleeved shirt behind them hurriedly said, "Didn't you hear him? Quickly man your posts, go with this sir to save them." "Yes, Captain." The sailors immediately shouted as one. They then ran to various parts of the deck, leaving behind only the short-sleeved shirt man and Zheng standing there, looking at each other. "I'm the captain of this fishing boat, Arnold Bates. Is this sir a member of a God's Realm team?" Zheng immediately froze in place. He was very sure that this ship was a very normal civilian fishing vessel. There were no humans stronger than ordinary people on board, so these people couldn't be Team East Sea either. Then how did they know of the existence of God's Realm teams? "You've met Team East Sea? Did they request something of you?" Zheng asked curiously, as he carefully prepared himself. "What's Team East Sea?" The man was instead confused. However, he didn't mind it, but took out a black box. "About a month back, a man appeared before me. He gave me a large sum of money, and the job he gave me was to give you this black box when you appeared. Come to think of it, you two look really similar. Apart from the difference in the position of the scar on your face, you two look practically the same." Zheng was shocked in his heart. He already knew who this captain was talking about. In the whole realm, only one person fit this description. His clone. However, could his clone bypass God to enter someone else's movie, and know in advance Zheng would meet this person before him? This wasn't possible, unless he had entered the fifth stage. Forcibly suppressing the shock in his heart, Zheng still received that black box. It was burning hot inside the black box as his hand entered. Unprepared, he subconsciously flung the box away. The box exploded in the air, turning into black flames. The black flames then actually slowly coalesced into a human figure. "We meet again." "No, it's not a meeting, but you listening to my voice, original me." The human figure the black flames formed was indistinct, but that voice was extremely familiar to Zheng. It was a voice he could never forget in this life. It was the voice of his clone, a voice very similar to his, but carrying incomparable bleakness. "What do you want? To kill me before the final battle?" Zheng coldly laughed. He drew out Tiger's soul, and the four energies within his body began flowing. If he saw this figure initiate an attack, he would immediately jump off the boat to deal with it. No matter what, this boat couldn't be lost. That figure waved its hand. "Don't be anxious. This is just a communication tool between you and me. Our true battle shall happen during the final battle. It's still too early now. If I dispose of you too early, the final battle will be boring. I heard that you didn't die after Resident Evil Apocalypse, but instead slowly became stronger. You've turned Team China into the third strongest after Team Devil and Team Celestial. I learned about you and Team China's existence from the other teams. Be proud. You have the qualifications to challenge me. Challenge. Zheng laughed coldly again. He lifted up Tiger's soul, pointing it at the figure. What a joke. A challenge? No, I will defeat you. I shall not lose again. I will completely, utterly defeat you the next time we meet. Listen carefully. This isn't a challenge, but the destined battle between us. Neither you nor I can run from this. Yes. We can't run from this. The human figure seemed to laugh coldly as well. He waved his hand, saying, if you still carry that incorrect mindset from Resident Evil Apocalypse, that cowardly hypocrisy, I don't mind killing you right here and now. Since it's the final battle, it needs a beautiful ending. Is your power and mentality prepared to face me? Correct. Everything he had experienced flashed through Zheng's mind abruptly. From the Resident Evil when he was still weak, till the great changes in Resident Evil Apocalypse. There was the mummy world where he had resurrected many companions, and the turning point, a nightmare on Elm Street, where he had become strong and died. And the so many things he had experienced, the incredibly long time he had gone through, and all that he had done. Correct. I will definitely beat you. I need to beat you. Your thinking has been wrong from the start. Revenge definitely isn't wrong. Tearing enemies into pieces is as it should be too. But, I will never abandon what we cherish, what we have approved, and those that fought shoulder to shoulder with us. So, I must beat you. The human figure went silent. After a long time, he extended a hand, saying, a hero complex? Although you're not mature yet, you still have the qualifications to face me. Fine. I'll wait here for you, at the position of the apex. Zheng, make it to me alive, and I shall grant you the right to challenge me. Also don't face me alone if you haven't unlocked the utmost possible of the fourth stage. Otherwise, the result will be as it was before. I'm waiting for you, original me. Let me see it. How much power your childish mindset can unleash. If you can, never mind. I'll be waiting for you at the final battle. When the figure finished its words, it dissipated in the rain, completely disappearing. Zheng stood in the rain for very long, lost in thought. He was only startled awake from the booming of a thunderbolt across the sky. Zheng silently recalled his clone's words. However, he didn't know what he had been trying to express. Does he hope for me to beat him? What was he trying to express to me during that unfinished sentence at the end? Also, how can he come into the movie I'm in? Has he really reached the fifth stage? The shadow of his clone had always been weighing down on all the members of Team China. His strength couldn't be described in words, and now, Zheng had discovered he could enter others' movies. This discovery was shocking, and also confirmed the validity of Honglu's words. The utmost possible of the fourth stage, was it? As Zheng was facing the shadow of his clone, the rest of the far-off Team China were in a difficult position. A mere small airship basket wasn't able to endure all this, and they had also encountered a school of sharks. The sharks had come too abruptly. Yingkong, who had been swimming in the sea, had suddenly been dragged underwater by a shark. Although she had quickly resurfaced, the shark, which had been torn into pieces, had whipped the surrounding sharks into an even greater frenzy. With no alternative left, those swimming in the sea could only go into the basket. However, that only made the basket slowly sink downwards, and the water began submerging everyone on board. Aren't sharks' noses very sensitive? They can smell the scent of blood from a distance. After killing this shark, I don't know how many sharks will be attracted over. Junchen was looking at the sharks swimming back and forth, and was so terrified that his body began trembling. For some unknown reason, Yingkong's face reddened slightly. However, she didn't say a word, only turning her head to look at the sharks in the sea. Could it be Cheng Xiao was suddenly surprised? It was even a pleasant surprise, as he shouted out. Just these three words made Yingkong's expression incredibly agitated. She hurriedly turned to Cheng Xiao. Shut up. However, Cheng Xiao had completed what he was saying a step earlier. Could it be your good friend is visiting? So the scent of blood lured the sharks over? Ha ha ha. It was an extremely tragic ending. Cheng Xiao was viciously kicked over 10 meters away. This was the sea, and with a splash, he fell into the water and created a spray that reached several meters tall. At the same time, the surrounding sharks rushed over as if they smelled meat. Cheng Xiao leapt in fright, and swam back to the basket with all his might. Her good friend is here. Could it be true, seeing how her agitated expression? Is that why she attracted a sharks when swimming in the sea? Everyone wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, but they didn't dare utter a word seeing Cheng Xiao's plight. Most likely, he would be killed by the girl even if he made it back to the basket. After all, the words he had spoken just now were indeed too obscene. After a long time, Cheng Xiao finally clambered back onto the basket with great exhaustion. He had a number of bite wounds on his body. Although he had killed a few sharks, he no longer had any energy to move a muscle. Everyone was concentrating all their attention on the sea surface, afraid that a moment of carelessness would lead to a sneak attack. Such a large animal was able to tear a person in half with one bite. Those rookies' face turned deathly pale, their body trembling incessantly as if they had contracted dysentery. Junchen looked at the people around him, and suddenly saw the tamer's medallion Honglu was wearing on his chest. He shouted. Honglu, quickly bring out our black dragon. That's right, can't we fly up with the dragon? Well, be safe then. Honglu immediately began to laugh coldly. The little boy wiped away the sweat on his face. Don't kid around. Do you think God will really give you the chance to play tricks? See the lighting in the sky? It's definitely courting death if we fly to the sky now. Not just this, but God's notification just now was full of traps. This is the so-called word games. The so-called flying equipment, does it refer to flight technology, or anything that helps you fly? If it's the latter, how do you dare ascertain a dragon isn't counted as a tool? It's not your innate ability, nor is it a naturally born creature. To be exact, its existence is a biological weapon of Team China, a living prop we got from the movies. So, just wait for Zheng to bring that ship back. While I say that, it would be pretty cool to fly in the sky riding a dragon. Why isn't Zheng back? I need to maintain my dignity before the rookies. However, there are so many sharks below, and I'm not a melee competent. Wouldn't I be dead meat if I fell in? I'm so scared my whole body is turning to jelly. Hurry back. Quickly, hurry back. Zheng was standing at the prow of the ship, looking anxiously at the distant dark sea. The increasingly turbulent waves, the incessantly falling purple lightning, and the whirlpools in the sea filled his heart with a foreboding premonition. Although he had just used the metal piece to contact Xian, and it was all probably fine according to him, the word probably raised too many questions. This was especially when that fellow Xian was the one who said it, then it was far from good. He had a really bad premonition about all this. Xian, if you dare to scheme against the rest, and let them fall into danger, I will definitely skin you alive. No, I'll eat you alive. Zheng was scared. Not of this abominable weather or anything else. As members of Team China, they were very strong. They stood at the upper tier of the realm. This abominable weather, even if it was in the deep sea, couldn't harm them within a short period of time. However, if Xian had done a little bit of something else, then it would be difficult to say. Hurry, hurry back. Zheng urged the sailors and the captain unceasingly. After experiencing that flaming human, the sailors and captain treated Zheng with respect as if he were a ghost or god, not doing things sloppily in the least. Under Zheng's commands, the ship was steered in the direction he requested. Of course, in this storm, a normal ship could only be directed in the general direction of north, south, east or west, and couldn't be specific to the point of longitude and latitude. Zheng's heart got more and more panicked, and could only helplessly use the metal plate to contact the team every minute or two. After that, he maintained constant contact, until he found their location. However, under this damnable storm, who knew where the waves had already brought them? The place he had left just now had definitely been in this vicinity. There are so many shark corpses on the surface of the sea. At this moment, a sailor at the prow of the boat suddenly shouted. Everyone looked at where he pointed. Dozens of shark corpses were actually floating on the surface of the sea, drifting back and forth with the waves. This patch of sharks seemed to have floated here from far away, and there were also many bits and pieces of shark remains. Zheng immediately shouted, "Go over. That way. Go to the direction the sharks drifted over from." In the direction the sharks had drifted from, Cheng Xiao was desperately somersaulting in the sea. It wasn't that he had suddenly turned courageous and wanted to kill all the sharks in the sea. It was that there was a girl with a ferocious expression presently standing in the basket. Her hands were gripping something tightly in mid-air, as if she was holding some weapon, only that she was empty-handed. "Yingkong. My legs are cramping, I really can't do it anymore. Let me go back up." Cheng Xiao was somersaulting continuously in the sea, and suddenly leapt out of the sea like a dolphin. His entire body did a flip in mid-air, and a shark below that had been charging at him to give him a bite was diced into pieces. However, this fellow was currently breathing roughly, and he did indeed look tired. It wasn't known how long he'll last for. Yingkong gazed coldly at the sea. "Either kill all the sharks or I kill you. I assume you have a preference. Can you kill the sharks? Let's combine the two choices." Cheng Xiao froze, then shouted. Yingkong didn't even hesitate, waving her hand. An air blade slashed towards Cheng Xiao, scaring him till he screeched, not daring to utter another word. He could only dive into the water to avoid the air blade. Of course, he had no choice but to face the countless sharks. So many sharks. Zero, who had remained silent all this time, suddenly spoke out. "Is this one of the difficulties of the perfect storm? Let Cheng Xiao back up. He's almost at his limit." Finished speaking, he took out his Gauss sniper rifle. When Cheng Xiao encountered danger, he could immediately provide support. Wang Xia made the same actions. Several plasma bombs floated beside him. As Cheng Xiao was still in the water, he didn't dare rashly throw the bombs in. He could only begin a large area cleanup when Cheng Xiao got back in the basket. At this moment, a searchlight flashed over from a distance. They could faintly hear Zheng's shouts, and when they turned their heads over, they saw a human figure with wings fly over speedily. He fished out Cheng Xiao from the water, and hovered in the air. This person was, as expected, the returning Zheng. "This is great, everyone is fine. But Yingkong, why are you staring so hatefully at me?" Zheng saved Cheng Xiao, and silently counted the number of his teammates internally, before calling out excitedly. At the same time, he gave voice to a doubt he had in his heart. He saw Yingkong, who was standing in the basket, gaze hatefully at him, as if she had suffered some grievance. She merely snorted softly, not uttering a word. She quietly kept Excalibur, and at this moment, the distant ship finally reached. The sailors on board made a clamor, then threw a rope over to the basket below. Haha. Cheng Xiao did go overboard this time. Even if it's really that time for a girl cough, you shouldn't say it out, right? Haha, you deserved a beating. After getting on the ship, everyone got a hot shower, then congregated in the assembly room of the ship to discuss the next step. When Zheng heard what had happened, he immediately started laughing loudly, until Ying Kong's face went red. Only when she started getting angry, did he stop. He then said seriously, "It's time to go back to topic. I heard from the captain we're near Hawaii now. If we want to snatch a destroyer, it's best to go Hawaii. America's Pacific Fleet's headquarters is at Pearl Harbor. From our current location, we can rush there in at most 24 hours. Xian said as he bit an apple. Can you not eat an apple while we're discussing? Zheng sighed. When Xian heard it, he paused. He abandoned the apple, and took out a tomato instead. As he ate, he said, it would take about 10 days from Pearl Harbor to Senkaku Islands under the storm in a normal boat. It'll take around 5 days in a fast destroyer. But if it's modified, and some unconventional thrusters are added in, the speed can be greatly increased. However, it'll take a day to get to Hawaii from our current position. Together with all the delays, I predict it'll take 5 days to reach Senkaku Islands. 5 days. Zheng went silent. After a long time, he said, then, we'll go at the fastest speed to Pearl Harbor. I hope we can catch up to Team East Sea. Xian, wouldn't our chances of catching up be 50-50 if so? Honglu, who had been eating at the side, raised his head. He asked doubtfully, although in terms of speed, this is the fastest we can go without flying, the probability of catching up is too low. Don't you have any other ways of catching up faster? I don't have a way to catch up faster, but I do have a way to raise this 50% chance. Xian didn't procrastinate, but immediately nodded his head in admittance. Air. Zheng was momentarily hesitant, then asked Honglu, since you asked, it means you definitely have a way of your own. Say it, what do you think? Honglu giggled, and plucked out off a hair from his forehead, asking as he looked at the hair, you're not asking Xian, but me? It's better to ask him for matters like these, or are you scared? Zheng and the surrounding people laughed bitterly. Hong replied in place of him. He was currently sitting next to Honglu, and ruffled his hair. Don't say it's Zheng. We too, are very scared. Xian's plans are usually a little too odd, there shouldn't be a problem using the word violent, is there? Everyone around nodded in confirmation, while Xian himself didn't mind. He single-mindedly ate his tomato, letting everyone discuss the plan. Honglu giggled again. Don't put it so easily. Apologies, my plan is pretty violent too, and a very dangerous kind of violent. No matter how violent, it will never be more violent than Xian's. Even if he doesn't say anything, I know his plan is roughly to randomly fire the magic cannon in the direction of Senkaku Islands. If it hits, then they deserve it. If it misses, fire again. That's why, no matter how violent Honglu's plan is, it will at least be safer than Xian's. Several people had this thought. So, in consensus, everyone nodded to Honglu. This reaction made the little boy laugh loudly. The little boy didn't maintain his mysteriousness, and as if showing off, he looked at Xian. Carrying some slight pride, he spoke. Actually, my plan is also a pretty violent plan. Aren't we planning to seize America's warship? We might as well just blow up the matter, and seize a few warships at one go. We could also do something else, and cause a stir across the world. If that's not possible, we at least have to attract the attention of America and a few big countries. If we can't go at the fastest speed to Senkaku Islands, it'll be fine too letting Team East Sea go at the slowest speed to Senkaku Islands. As the ship headed towards Pearl Harbor, the two newbies had begun to worry. After all, their strength wasn't that great yet, and their bodies weren't much stronger than ordinary humans. If several soldiers shot at them, Junchen would definitely die, except for Lu Yu, who might survive if he managed to luckily summon a card. That was why they were worried about dying from a stray shot while seizing the warship. Even with the protection of the dragon's hard necklace, they would die if America no longer wanted the warships, and wanted them to die there and then, and fired an anti-ship missile at them. So, they worrisomely asked Zheng. Although I don't want to admit it, but isn't this what we usually do? Zheng was slightly astonished in response. After saying those words, he recalled after a long time that these two fellows were rookies, or basically semi-rookies. Their strength was weak amongst Team China, and their experience wasn't great. Their courage hadn't yet been cultivated either. Thus, it was unavoidable to have some slight panic when meeting such a situation. After all, who in the real world would dare seize a country's warship? Even terrorists wouldn't dare. Only the God's Realm teams, not of this world, would dare. We don't just dare. If Xian were in charge, he wouldn't consider it a big deal to destroy the world. Isn't this what we do often? Thinking to this point, Zheng laughed bitterly. The veterans of Team China did indeed have a thinking completely transformed to that of a God's Realm team. Survival and the preservation of a team's power were the foremost priorities above all. Accurately speaking, every person's mentality would experience a process of change upon entry to God's realm. They first needed to change from a normal person to a member of a God's realm team. Their mentality needed to change from that of the comfortable and peaceful real world, to either a bloody cruelty or courage in God's realm. One had to choose between these two mentalities, thereafter raising their personal strength, be it through unlocking the genetic constraint, getting more and better enhancements, or self-creating abilities. These were all the second step of their mental transformation. After these two steps, the third step, that would truly make a God's Realm team whole, was to wholeheartedly maintain the team's power, letting the entire team continue on. In other words, they would continue developing. That was because in this stage, a team was incomparably important, whether for team battles, for the foundation of the final battle, someone to revive you after death, or someone to remember you. No matter what, although these two were rookies, they would one day mature, whether in power of mentality, until they could bear their responsibilities in Team China. Them then would become true members of Team China. Zheng earnestly consoled them with a few sentences, saying that they had crossed bigger hurdles before. After all, if you think about it, during the counterattack in Independence Day, wasn't it basically just seizing a warship? It was only that it was a space warship belonging to aliens. That had been much worse than provoking America, so there was no need to worry about something as small as provoking America. Seeing the two rookies walk off, sweating, Zheng laughed bitterly. The ship was nearing Pearl Harbor. Xian suddenly took out several small tools, alone in the cabin as he hammered away at something. Everyone who saw him noticed the fanatical expression on his face, which looked so hideous would be the word to describe it. Just as Zheng dismissed the newbies, he saw Xian come out from the cabin with a metal helmet. Xian immediately walked over when he spotted Zheng, making Zheng immediately shout out, "Don't even think about it. Don't think about making me wear that. Damn it, what are you playing at this time?" Xian ignored his fierce shouts, only indifferently saying, "I just completed the translations for the scientific techniques regarding the soul, as well as the research about the consciousness. This is a tool created based on the scientific techniques in the manual. It can connect two people's consciousness. Although it's only the outermost layer of the consciousness, its safety is greater than the time you saved Yingkong. There aren't any side effects. It's usable on those that haven't entered the fourth stage probably." A bad premonition suddenly formed in Zheng's heart. He hurriedly asked, "What's probably? What if there are side effects using it?" Xian turned his head away. "Merely some problems in the consciousness. If you say it's just some small problems, why are you turning your head away?" Zheng was truly exasperated. He immediately rejected. "Don't give me that. Don't even think you can make me wear that. We're also right about to capture Team East Sea Psyche Force user. Do you think I'm omnipotent, when you want to send me, a non-Psyche Force user, into someone's consciousness?" Xian frowned. He sighed, "I'll roughly explain to you about this matter. A human's conscious exists in their brain, or it can be said that the operation of the brain created a consciousness. This matter's explanation is too complicated, and I can't explain it to you with your intelligence. As an analogy, the consciousness would be a water bottle. It can basically be divided into the ego and subconscious. If we take the ego as the liquid in the bottle, the subconscious would be the bottle in place to protect our ego." Xian was, however, very patient. He actually found a spot to sit down and continue. A normal person's consciousness is roughly like a water bottle. As every consciousness is different, the size of the bottle would be different. So, some would become easy to hypnotize, while some people hard. Similarly, the liquid's quality and various other factors would determine whether or not an organism is a Psyche Force user. Alright, I've finished my explanation of a human's consciousness in general. Next, we'll move on to the proper things. First, a person's conscious would usually take place at the surface of the liquid, which can be called outer surface of the mind. The part where hypnosis takes place in is the middle level of the liquid, the inner mind, or the non-memory consciousness. There's also one more, a level of the consciousness untouchable through science, and the bottommost layer of the consciousness. I call this the anima, which is the level for the light of the soul, or abilities like the AT field you spoke of before. For those sleeping now, their conscious is roughly between the middle layer and bottom layer. The longer they sleep, the more their consciousness sinks within the liquid, until it's unsavable. If we don't capture Team East Sea Psyche Force user this time, they're dead whether or not there's a final battle. At the same time, the quality of the bottle and liquid will improve the further the genetic constraint is unlocked. The defense would also be higher, if something external invades and attacks. This was why I could let you save Yingkong before. She's unlocked a very high stage of the genetic constraint, so you could forcefully break through. However, that wasn't the case for the rest. If you forcefully did it, there was an over 40% chance of their consciousness collapsing and them becoming a vegetable. So, there's a need for you to find their consciousness in the sea of consciousness, and slowly guide them out of the heart's devil state. Although you can't wake them up, you can bring them to the middle layer so that a Psyche Force user can use forceful methods to wake them up. The probability of success then would be 80%. So it turned out that he was to be the bridge between the Psyche Force user and the one being saved. Also, it was to help Xian test his new creation. Zheng laughed bitterly. The result of this was the same as before. Although he was sure Xian had some conspiracy within, he couldn't reject the trap every time. Xian was just too crafty. Whatever the case, Zheng finally agreed to Xian's request. He wore the strange thing and entered Lan's and the rest's consciousness. In his eyes, that fellow Xian had a devil's tail behind him swinging to and fro. Although the fellow was peacefully eating an apple, this appearance would make anyone's hair stand on end. You'd best pray you don't land in my hands, or else. In truth, Xian hadn't landed in his hands yet. As Zheng muttered internally, his vision blacked out, and he lost consciousness. We've almost reached Pearl Harbor. Prepare for battle. Xian no longer looked at Zheng, and threw the finished apple overboard. He proceeded to the cabin everyone was gathered in. At the same time, in an area of the sea far from Team China, a vessel was braving the raging waves, with the Senkaku Islands as its destination. How far are we from Senkaku Islands? A man stood at the prow of the ship. His face was filled with strange, black runes. The falling rain actually didn't wet his body, merely vanishing when it got within half a meter of his head. From far off, a hemisphere could be seen around his body. About 4 more days. Team China probably shouldn't be able to chase up to us. Behind him, a stunning young lady, wearing a very traditional Japanese kimono, was currently holding a wooden parasol. The man sighed hearing this. Whether or not they chase up to us, all we can do now is do our best to rush over to Senkaku Islands. Damn it. We obviously have such a strong opponent, but all we can do is run. How humiliating. The young woman sighed softly as well. Although that's the case, we really can't tangle with Team China. This team is the second strongest team that defeated Team Celestial. We simply can't beat them. So, why not we give our best in fleeing, and stand together with Team Celestial in the final battle? That way, we still have a chance of survival. The man shut his eyes. He howled loudly, abruptly drawing the long sword sheath at his right waist. Brandishing it with his 2 hands, he slashed towards the sea. A streak of radiance swept past, parting the rain and creating an area of vacuum 20 centimeters thick. This light blade then landed on the sea, completely disappearing. Tell the captain full speed ahead. Destination: Senkaku Islands. I know you're sad. I also know you love me. What is true love on earth? It meant love everlasting though life and death. Zheng didn't look as himself as a love sage or someone extremely passionate. As an ordinary person grinded down by modern civilization, he had thought he had already become numbed and was immune to romance, love, and the like. This was normal in modern society. Or rather, this strange normal was the socially expected ordinary person. This perception only gradually changed upon entry to God's realm. Only when he completely overcame his heart's devil when he died and resurrected, did he understand why God chose those who had lost something before from the real world. It was because loss was necessary. This was similar to Xian's life experiences. If a perfect person struggled for survival in this world where you could die anytime, he may not necessarily have the courage to stand up once again. A defeat may lead to his complete annihilation, like how Team China only had one survivor in Resident Evil Apocalypse. Ordinary people wouldn't have the courage to fight again then. Only those who had experienced many losses before could bear the bitterness of loss and rise again. That was why, those who entered the realm were those apathetic towards the real world, or disappointed in it. Each person had his or her own story, whether the story was a tragedy, or merely a motivation to become strong, such as Xian. Zheng entered Lan's consciousness space first. The apparatus Xian had created was much more advanced than the glasses before. Not only did it allow existence in this space as a spirit, he could voluntarily accept the memories of the owner of this consciousness world. Even the emotions hidden in the deepest recesses could be felt perfectly. How could this feeling be described? It was extremely strange. Lan's consciousness space wasn't a perfect and orderly space. It was much lacking in this as compared to Yingkong's space, as could be seen now. As Xian said, there was a correlation between the genetic constraint unlocked and the strength of the consciousness. Psyche Force users were no exception to this. This was like Alice visiting a strange world like Wonderland. The world was without order. In one moment Zheng would be standing in a modern city, watching Lan take a walk. In the next moment, he would be in a certain movie world in God's realm, watching the monsters within howling. He searched for order within such a chaotic world, continuously experiencing what Lan had gone through in the past. He saw her smile, he saw her cry. Lan was a normal girl, and had had a period of innocent first love. She innocently lost her first love as well. Then, like all normal girls, she spent her time growing up studying, slowly becoming more beautiful. Until she met him. A truly nice man. Once again, she had a crush. No, it was true love. He was truly a good man. He had a sense of responsibility, sympathy, compassion, and was extremely courageous. In this mundane and vulgar world, men like this were just too few. These sort of men were either turned normal by this vulgar world or money. Otherwise, they were slowly corrupted by society. They weren't tolerated by the world. They either died or were bullied non-stop by people, until they were completely buried or went bad. Kind men are bullied, while kind horses are ridden. This wasn't an unjustified saying. Of course, in Zheng's memories, he had once seen a comedy, which said that corrupt officials were treacherous. Thus, virtuous officials had to be even more treacherous. In the same vein, if you wanted to be a good person, you had to be stronger than those bad, whether in intelligence, wealth, or even a physical fight. Only then could you keep your kindness. And this man was one such man. Wise, smart, hard-working. Although he hadn't accomplished much due to his youth, at least guessing through his current performance, this man's future was limitless. The two met, fell in love, then fell in deeper love. They were both kind souls, and possessed the same longing and belief in love. Thus, they both loved the other party deeply, and were bound to have a blissful future. If not for that accident, their future would have indeed have been as beautiful as a fairy tale, Something to look forward to. But he died. Zheng sighed. He silently opened his eyes. He had already woken up from Lan's consciousness. Xian's creation this time was indeed useful. It had utilized the scientific techniques of cultivation, allowing Zheng to easily exit that consciousness. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had already raised Lan's consciousness from the bottom layer. Awake. Just as Zheng sat up on the bed, an apple-eating man near him spoke. That man was indeed Xian. Don't state the obvious, of course I'm awake. What, do you think I'm sleepwalking? Zheng said unpleasantly. While speaking, he had already removed the blanket to get up. He then carefully measured his surroundings. He was sleeping in a cabin as before. However, it looked much larger than the cabin in the fishing vessel, and the beds were also arranged in orderly rows of double-decker beds. This was definitely no longer that small fishing vessel. If he hadn't guessed wrongly, he was currently in a warship. How long was I out for? Zheng rubbed his forehead. You've been asleep for 1 day and 1 night since we left Pearl Harbor. Xian closed the documents in his hand, speaking as he ate an apple. Although it's strange to ask this question now, don't you think you've been eating apples with too great a frequency recently? Zheng asked unpleasantly. Due to the implantation of the eye, there's a large consumption of energy on the body. Even when not in use, the energy consumption is 5 times of a normal person slowly running. So, I need ingest large quantities of food to remedy this deficiency. These apples are apples I used genetic modification to cultivate in God's realm. There's high-calorie fructose inside. A single apple has more calories than an ordinary person eating a large meal. The eye also has an energy accumulation function, so regularly eating apples is beneficial to energy storage. Xian explained as if it was nothing. Doraemon, you truly have evolved. Zheng continued to rub his forehead. He had a slight headache regarding this fellow who was getting closer and closer to Doraemon. After a long time, he asked, was anyone injured in the assault on Pearl Harbor? No one. Xian turned his eyes away while speaking. Hey, you're too guilty, right? You're already turning your eyes away. It turned out that Team China indeed attacked Pearl Harbor. Even without Zheng's combat support, Team China's remaining members were strong enough for a surprise attack. In a surprise attack, they were able to either destroy an army or a warship within 10 minutes. This was without even using the magic cannon. Apart from melee combat and anti-personnel combat, Wang Xia's bomb dominator ability was suitable in such a battlefield. Others, such as Hung's energy volleys, could also instantaneously kill over 10,000 people. Zero's Gauss sniper rifle could penetrate warships. Even if the others didn't act, these few were sufficient. Intimidation and a display of power, along with Wang Xia detonating a few miniature nuclear bombs, had allowed them to successfully coerce over 100 American Navy soldiers, leaving for Senkaku Islands with a destroyer in tow. The basic situation is like that. Everything went smoothly. Smoothly, my ass. Why did you fire the magic cannon halfway in the direction of the island for? After Zheng woke up, the members all gathered as usual to discuss the next step. Zheng immediately made a ruckus without restraint when he heard how Xian had handled things. This was because there was a naval force of at least 3 aircraft carriers chasing behind them. In front, the navies of Japan, Korea, and several countries were forming a blockade. This destroyer could be said to be the public enemy of a majority of the world's countries. Before Xian could open his mouth, Honglu had already spoken a step ahead of him. Xian wasn't wrong this time. This is merely the opening of the scheme. Since it's possible we can't catch up to Team East Sea, well, make them slow down and wait for us. So, we need to borrow these countries' fleets. There's also a jammer Xian created in this destroyer, so the fleet can't find us unless we're face to face. We're also monitoring their communications. The moment traces of Team East Sea appear, our team battle with them will begin. In truth, Zheng knew that Xian doing this was understandable. Also, considering his personality, he would definitely do this. He would first use overwhelming power to terrorize and deter the Pearl Harbor Navy. He would also display some powers or weapons that exceeded the imagination of normal people, then use the magic cannon. Not only could this coerce the Navy soldiers to steer the destroyer and bring them out, it would also rouse the greed of all the countries. They would do their best to deploy their navy to form a blockade, which would also block Team East Sea. But it's still risky. Aside from the navy, how would we deal with planes and missiles? As long as he slightly thought about it, Zheng could understand these details. After all, this was what they always did. Using wit to draw up schemes, and force to break through tricks. Regardless, the operation this time was too dangerous. When American and the rest tracked them down, large quantities of aeroplanes and missiles would be awaiting them. In this boundless sea, even Zheng wouldn't be able to block such a powerful concentrated attack. So it was likely Team China would have fatalities, and even a large number of dead and injured. That was why Zheng had said Xian and the rest were too risky. Planes and missiles. Apart from Zheng and Xian, everyone showed a strange expression, like a smile yet not a smile on their face. If it had to be strictly defined, it would have been a bitter smile. Confused, Zheng was brought out of the cabin by them. The world outside was dim. Although it wasn't night yet or dusk, the surroundings were so dark it wasn't possible to see 10 meters out. A heavy downpour fell unendingly, and the giant waves practically lifting up the destroyer. Seeing that unceasing purple lightning, only someone suicidal would fly up into the sky in this perfect storm. Missiles couldn't penetrate the cloud cover in this weather. So, only other ships would be able to see and attack the destroyer. Alright, let's not discuss these threats for now. Let's discuss how to deal with Team East Sea. Zheng retreated back from into the conference room. Xian suddenly cut him off. Let's not discuss the method to deal with Team East Sea now. The consciousness space. Talk about Lan's consciousness space. The consciousness space was different from the real world. There weren't any special rules inside. The so-called time, space, and even the person's consciousness would be different from the real world. If an ordinary person's consciousness stayed here clear-headed, abnormalities would quickly appear in their psyche. This was just such a world. Zheng could with great difficulty rely on his light of the soul to search for Lan's consciousness body. It was a profound feeling that couldn't be explained to others. Zheng indeed found Lan's consciousness body, and even found the space it was in. He was in the house from they had been in a nightmare on Elm Street 3. Lan's consciousness was trapped within, continuously experiencing the moment of being trapped, the moment when her boyfriend in her memories displayed hostility towards her. It repeated over and over again, until the point when her consciousness would completely collapse. Freddy, the demon from Nightmare on Elm Street, possessed a unique psyche force ability. It was a psyche force ability more overbearing than hypnosis that could exaggerate and manifest the weakest parts of the heart. As long as there were cracks in the heart, they would sink forever into their heart's devil. That was why Nightmare on Elm Street was a supremely hard 20-person difficulty movie. Of course, if your heart was without flaw like Xian, Freddy would be controlled or destroyed instead if he entered Xian's consciousness. For those who had overcome their heart's devil like Zheng, their psyche was already so sturdy that they feared no psyche force ability. These should be the demon's bane. However, this heart's devil was still a bona fide heart's devil. How could an ordinary person easily overcome it? The larger the crack in the heart, the more the person wouldn't be able to wake up. Lan was extremely unfortunate, being a person with extremely thick fetters. Whether it was the fetters she bore before God's realm in the real world, or the fetters towards Zheng after entering, it could be said that she was the person most susceptible to being hurt by the heart's devil in the realm. Zheng kept trying to call her in the consciousness space she was trapped in. Although he could sense her faint response, the girl would instinctively retreat every time he tried to approach her consciousness, as if she was avoiding him. The basic situation was like that. Tui, take it that I didn't just say that. It's roughly like that. I could only raise her consciousness from the deepest level to the middle level. Although she can't wake up yet, overcoming the heart's devil will be easy if a psyche force user can assist me in waking her up. After this, he'll probably be asleep for one day and night. I need to go to campus consciousness to wake him up. Zheng talked about all he had experienced in the consciousness space. Everyone heard about the dangers within, but couldn't understand. In truth, the consciousness space was mysterious and unpredictable, and supremely dangerous. Fortunately, Zheng had unlocked the mid-4th stage and successfully conquered the heart's devil, which was why he didn't get lost in this consciousness space. If someone else had entered another's consciousness space, they would be in mortal danger unless they were a psyche force user with a high level of enhancement. The annihilation and insanity of the consciousness were where the great danger of the consciousness space lay. In one sentence, you let down a beauty's heart, so she's disappointed in you. Ha ha ha. Cheng Xiao patted Zheng's shoulder, chuckling. Zheng made a bitter laugh, not saying anything. He already knew all this from Lan's consciousness space. Although it wasn't everything, he at least knew her feelings for him. If before, the distance between the two was hazy and seemingly both far and near at the same time, now, he could no longer play dumb. When she woke up, or before the final battle, he had to give her an accounting. No matter what, I will save her, no, them. Zheng exhaled deeply, before looking to everybody. Remember, this team battle is the last battle before the final battle, and can be said to be a battle second in importance to the final battle. No one can die, and we'll try our best to wipe the other side. Everyone, please, do not have any thoughts of underestimating the enemy. Even if we're much stronger than Team East Sea, stronger and weaker is only relative. Haven't we ourselves triumphed over opponents stronger than us before? So, be careful this time. When he spoke to this point, he looked worriedly at Xian. I won't give the reins over to you for this battle. We can't take risks this time, especially right before the final battle. We can't have the slightest loss in combat power as we have to challenge Team Devil with the strongest lineup and power. Conversely, we need to ensure as much points and rank rewards to be obtained as possible. We can't use your dangerous probabilities to complete this mission. With capturing the enemy psyche force user as the prerequisite, however many of the other side we catch is however many we catch. We don't need to take risks for that. If a battle occurs when I'm sleeping, Honglu, you shall scheme and direct the battle. Wangxia and Zero, you two help him. Remember not to take risks. Then I'm entering campus consciousness space. If there's anything important, wait for me to come out before discussing it if it's not urgent. Remember not to take risks. When he saw everyone nod their heads, he finally left the cabin, relieved. However, he didn't see Xian shake his head after nodding it, a situation like the previous movie where he had said I lied to you. At the same time, in the sea far off from Team China's destroyer, that seldom seen violent storm was here as well. Giant waves rose to 10 meters or even higher, and ordinary boats had the danger of being destroyed here. Even the modern metal ships built through science could only drift along like a skiff in these giant waves in this disaster. Human might was simply unable to stand up to such a massive natural disaster. The ship Team East Sea were in was no exception. The storm greatly impacted the fishing vessel's speed. Team East Sea, which should originally have been nearing the Diao Islands, had went off course 10 hours earlier due to the storm and sea flow. Although they had managed to right their course later on, their arrival time had been delayed by over a day, without even factoring in the influence of the storm. Unacceptable. This ship is too slow. Who knows whether we'll be able to reach Senkaku Islands before Team China catches up? In the largest conference cabin room on the ship, a total of 13 East Sea members were sitting down. The one who had spoken was a tall baldy whose body was filled with bulging muscles, his face covered with countless scars. His eyes were filled with licentiousness, and he obviously wasn't some good character. As Baldy spoke, the rest faintly sighed. The sword-carrying man with a face full of black runes also sighed. After a long period of silence, he said, "That's how it is. We have a large probability of being caught up to by Team China. So, I suggest we use the equipment Adam gave us. What do you all think?" The equipment Adam had given them was an old and queer item made using Western alchemy. This item wasn't exchangeable through God, and wasn't something that could be made in a short time. In a movie that Team East Sea had encountered Team Celestial, they and another team had received this equipment as they had surrendered early and agreed to join Team Celestial's alliance. Supposedly, this was an auxiliary device capable of linking up to the main device. It would be able to connect through time and space even if they were on different worlds. As long as Team Celestial held the main device, Team East Sea would be able to contact them in any difficult situation. As he spoke, the man took out a diamond-shaped object that looked similar to a Rubik's Cube. Did Team Celestial find some ancient treasury in some movie? And it seems to be a magic-type movie. This equipment is over 10,000 years old or even older according to God's age appraisal. It couldn't have been manufactured by them. They also have so many auxiliary devices. They could casually distribute them to us and the other team. They themselves should have much greater benefits. When this equipment was taken out, everyone sunk into a deep silence once again. There was a beautiful girl in a kimono amongst them, deep in thought. The black runes-faced man took a deep look at everyone. He said, "Well, take a vote. Do we contact Team Celestial? This equipment can be used 3 times and this time would be the second use. The last use has to be kept for the final battle to contact Team Celestial. However, we'll be able to use it 2 times in the final battle if we don't use it now. Our chances of quickly finding Team Celestial will rise. Then, cast your vote. Do we use this communication device in this battle with Team China?" Everyone looked at each other. Following the first person who raised a hand, gradually everyone raised their hands aside from the black runes-faced man and the kimono woman. Then, "Well, use it?"